here, right now. This is Right Time Reborn, where we go over the week's news with you and explain just why America's political left is so dangerously wrong in all of its opinions on the news and current events and policy and law and government and basically everything else there is. My name is Imra Becca. I am your host. We are a brand new podcast. This is only our third episode, but we will be bringing you news, information, opinion, political truth every week, every Friday, until we can no longer do so. Well, let's start with some international affairs. Sad news. By now, most of you have heard that there was a massive earthquake in Turkey and Syria. 22,000 people dead so far, and they are not done counting, it appears. And many people have asked why it is that these kinds of earthquakes hit that region. Well, from what I've been able to tell, there are 4 fault lines that come together in eastern Turkey and western Syria. And they've been having regular earthquakes, big earthquakes, for a long time now. There was one in 1999 where 18,000 people died. In 1939, 33,000 people died. There have been dozens of earthquakes in the last century, many of them with well over 1,000 people having died. This is one of the most dangerous, seismically dangerous parts of the world. In any instance, regardless of politics, regardless of international affairs, our prayers and our good wishes go out to the families of those who died, those who are still missing. For all we know, there may be Americans involved because we do have NATO bases in the region. Let's hope for the best. Okay, so a little bit closer to home, experts now believe that the Chinese, the communist Chinese who run the largest nation on Earth, have been firing mysterious green laser beams over Hawaii. First, we have a gigantic hot air balloon that appears over the Pacific Northwest, floats over the entire country as neatly as you please until it's past our seashore, and finally the president decides, we've had enough, it's time to blow it up. And he sends out a fighter plane to take it down. And now we're talking about laser beams that we don't know the reason why, but apparently the Chinese have decided that shooting them over Hawaii is an advisable thing to do. We don't understand why they're doing it. Is it a provocation? Is it some kind of experiment? Are they probing our defenses? Whatever it is, it's time for the U.S. government, which is unfortunately led by one of the weakest presidents in history, but it's time for the government to respond. It's time for the government to make it very clear to the Chinese that we will not tolerate incursions into our territorial space, whether it's laser beams, balloons, or any other kind of party favor. We will not accept this here in the United States. This is not something that should be allowed. We should not be getting ourselves into a situation where we accept these incursions from a nation that very well could be a military rival, certainly is an economic rival, and which is likely to attack one of our allies, Taiwan, sometime in the next few years. And yes, Taiwan is an ally of ours, but officially, neither the Chinese nor the Taiwanese government believe that Taiwan is a separate country. They both believe that, or that their official position is that each one is the government over all of China. Well, this is what we call a legal fiction. Clearly, Taiwan is a country of its own. Clearly, they have no power over mainland China. Clearly, the government of mainland China has no power over Taiwan at this point, although they very much would like to. And there's a good chance that there's going to be a war of some sort. And we have committed, the United States has committed to protecting Taiwan in case of some sort of invasion by China. So it very well could be that these balloons, these lasers, and whatever else we don't yet know about are there in order to either provoke us or to intimidate us or to test our defenses or some combination of these three. It's entirely possible. And we need to be ready. We need to absolutely be ready. Well, this week was the occasion of the State of the Union, the 2023 State of the Union. Joe Biden stood up there, and he looked a whole lot like Walter from the Jeff Dunham ventriloquist puppet series. He looked a lot like Walter standing up there. It's no wonder that Jeff Dunham has made some very funny, very successful videos with Walter remade as Joe Biden. So because there is a strong resemblance there, and Biden certainly looked like that at the State of the Union. And it wasn't that long ago that Representative Joe Wilson shouted "You lie" at President Barack Obama when he made his very first State of the Union address, and people were shocked. Well, this time around, there were a lot of boos coming at Joe Biden, and several of the Republican congressmen and women were not particularly friendly to President Biden. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has proven herself to not be the smartest card in the deck when it comes to Republican congressional representatives, this time she was right on point when she yelled "liar" at Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was lying. There were some flat out dishonest statements by Joe Biden. One being that Republicans wanted to end Medicare and Social Security. Nobody wants to end Medicare and Social Security. That wasn't what anybody's position was, and it's certainly not what the majority of the Republicans in either house want. But Biden is jumping on this bandwagon. Now, historically speaking, the Democrats have done this. They've played this card many times over the last 40 or 50 years. Every time the Republicans want a balanced budget, every time the Republicans want to lower taxes, every time the Republicans want to bring sanity back to the spending system in Washington, D.C., the Democrats default to this lie that the Republicans want to end Social Security and Medicare. It's not true. Nobody wants to end Social Security and Medicare. That's nonsense. And the Democrats love to lie about this. And by now, you would think that people would be used to it. I mean, there are people who are now on Social Security who were too young to vote the first time the Democrats started pulling this Bravo Sierra propaganda demagoguery move about Social Security. They do this all the time. And it's time for the Republicans to call them on it and to really call them to the carpet. And we don't do it. I got to tell you, Republicans we're just not good at messaging. We are not good at messaging. We are not the kinds of people who come up with ways of marketing our own ideas in a manner that the American people will comprehend. And I think this is what the problem is. The problem is that the Republicans know that the things they're saying, the positions they're taking, especially conservative Republicans, the positions they're taking are true. We have truth on our side, whether it's about abortion or military issues or the border or fiscal responsibility or anything else. We have truth on our side. And therefore, we think that if all we do is speak the truth, that will convince the American people. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. You have to actually be convincing. You have to be good at messaging. And the Republicans refuse to package things in a way that is palatable by the American people. The Democrats, on the other hand, they lie all the time. Therefore, the only way that they can win is to be very, very good at marketing. And they are. They have become incredibly good at marketing. Very good. And frankly, we need to understand that if you speak the truth, but you do it badly, you don't know how to market it, and you're facing somebody who's going to lie but does it very well, the liar will win every time. We need to get better. We need to continue telling the truth, but we need to tell it better. And the Republican Party, Republican politicians are not good at this. There is a reason why when Ronald Reagan was president, we referred to him as the great communicator, because he was good at this. He was able to make people go, wow, it's true. It's real. We have to believe this guy because he makes sense. Today, very few Republican politicians are able to do this. Very, very few. And so we have the response to the State of the Union was given out by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And, it was not a bad response, but it wasn't nearly as good as we would like. She did a good job, but she did a lot of talking about herself rather than about the issues. She didn't push back at Biden enough, although she did say that we need a new generation of Republican leadership to lead this country, which was not only a swipe at Joe Biden, but it was also a backhanded slap at her former boss, Donald Trump, because she's saying it is time to pass the torch. And she's right. There's no question that she's right. We need as she says, a new generation of Republican leadership. She says, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. She's right. But where's the solution? Where is the solution? You may be able to capture the focus of the American people for a few seconds or a few minutes, but you got to give them a solution. Where is the solution? Simply saying generally a new generation of Republican leadership is needed is not enough. We have somebody. We definitely have somebody who's available and who is probably going to be running. Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is likely going to be running for president, almost certainly. And he may be a few weeks or a few months away from announcing that, but there's a good chance that he's going to be one of the candidates. And if he is, there's a very good chance that he will be the nominee. He is smart. He is undoubtedly conservative. He's been a Republican his entire voting life. He didn't jump around from one party to another as the previous president did. He's charismatic. I've personally been to speeches where Ron DeSantis was speaking, and his speeches were very Reagan-esque. They were inspirational. They were animated. He spoke in a way where everybody who was there, our jaws dropped at what an amazing speaker this man is. He has shown that he can run a large state government. We're not talking about a state that has 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million people. He runs the third largest state in the country, over 22 million people. Florida has outgrown New York. New York used to be the third state, now it's the fourth state. New York used to have more congressmen and more electoral votes than Florida. Now it no longer does. We've gone way up above New York. And Ron DeSantis is one of the reasons why Florida is doing as well as it is economically, in terms of freedom, in terms of our national values being resurrected down here. And now there's 3 different super PACs which are raising money and spending money on trying to promote DeSantis as the best choice for the nominee for the 2024 elections. There's no question that there's a movement afoot to really promote Ron DeSantis. And on the other side of the coin, the Republicans, we're not just talking about the establishment here. Don't let anybody fool you. It's not just the establishment. The Republican Party, including the grassroots, is really moving away from Donald Trump and into the camp of Ron DeSantis. And now some of the bigwigs in the Republican Party are becoming more and more open in their opposition to Donald Trump. And that includes pretty much all of the major political donors on the right side of the political fence. Just a few days ago, the Koch brothers, only one of them is around now, but the Americans for Prosperity, which is a Koch brothers group, announced that they are not going to be supporting Donald Trump. They're going to be looking for somebody new. Now, they didn't come flat out and say Ron DeSantis, but the description they gave sounds a whole lot like Governor DeSantis. People are tired of somebody who is constantly looking for a personal fight. They're tired of somebody who is cherry-picking polls, who is attacking anybody who opposes him, who insults people, who comes up with outrageous stories in order to try to hurt his opponents. I mean, just remember the incredibly ridiculous thing that he said in 2016 about Ted Cruz's father. He tried to make it out like Ted Cruz's father was somehow involved in the Kennedy assassination. Are you kidding me? And he's just gotten more outrageous as time goes on. But now we have somebody who is strong, who is principled, who has values, who is young enough to have the energy to push forward and run over the Democrats like a steamroller. And most importantly, this is an extremely important point to take into consideration. Ron DeSantis can be president for 2 terms. Donald Trump cannot. Let's repeat that. Ron DeSantis, unlike Donald Trump, can be president for 2 terms. He can be president from 2024, and then again, he can be elected in 2028. Which means that we will have from January 2025 to January 2033, we will have a strong conservative Republican president if we elect this man and make sure he gets reelected. Now, a lot of Trump supporters are coming out and they're saying things like, well, Ron DeSantis could be Trump's running mate. No, he can't. Because the Constitution says that the electors of any given state can vote for a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate from their own state. They cannot vote for 2 people from the same state. So the Florida electors cannot vote for both Trump and DeSantis. They can't do it. And without the 30 electoral votes that come from Florida, we're not going to win. We don't have enough. It's not going to happen without Florida. So if there's a split, we would end up with either Trump as president and a Democrat vice president, or a Democrat as president and Ron DeSantis as vice president. We cannot have both Trump and DeSantis. It's not going to happen. So that idea, you can just throw it out the window. It's never going to happen. It cannot happen. It is not possible. Then the other thing that Trump supporters are saying, well, let's let Trump be president in 24 and DeSantis can win after him. No, not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because we almost never have a second-term president followed by a president of his own party. Last time we had it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan had 2 terms as president, and then George H.W. Bush came after him. Before that, you got to go back to the time of Ulysses Grant, and before that, you have to go back to the Founding Fathers. We don't do that in America. We very, very rarely have that happen. And when we have it happen, it's because we've got presidents who are extremely popular and have created a momentum for their own party. Is Donald Trump that popular? No. His popularity is somewhere between low 30s and high 30s. Roughly about a third of the country, or roughly about a third of Republicans actually, support Donald Trump. A lot less than a third of the country. So we need to be realistic about this. If Donald Trump is our nominee and by some miracle happens to win, and chances are he won't win. He doesn't have the ability to win the popular vote in this country. And without the popular vote, he's not going to get reelected. Oh, that's another issue. We have had so far 5 presidents who lost the popular vote and still won the Electoral College. 5 times it's happened in our history, out of 59 elections. Let's repeat that. 5 presidents out of 59 elections, less than 10% of our elections, were won where a candidate who lost the popular vote won the Electoral College. So right off the bat, you're talking about a better than 90% chance that somebody who is going to lose the popular vote cannot win the presidency. But there's an even bigger stumbling block there. We have never had a president win a second term while losing the popular vote. It's never happened. 0%. The only time it's ever happened is in a first-term election. Never for a second-term election. Never, ever. We've only had one president who lost his reelection, spent an entire term out of office, and then came back and won a second term. That was Grover Cleveland. And Grover Cleveland actually won the popular vote all 3 times he ran. His second election was one of those 5 times when his opponent won the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. But Cleveland won the popular vote. He always had the American people behind him. He always had a majority of the vote behind him. He was a very popular politician. And that's why he was able to do something that no other president was able to do. And now we're talking about whether Donald Trump can do that. No, he's not nearly popular enough. So if he runs, chances are he will lose if he is the nominee. If he wins by some miracle, by some inconceivable quirk of fate, he will be followed by a Democrat immediately in 2028. There is no question. He does not have the popularity to create momentum for somebody who comes after him, and he will have plenty of people who dislike him enough to vote for the Democrat just to hurt the Republicans for nominating Donald Trump. Trump cannot win. Chances are he can't win the nomination. If he wins the nomination, chances are he cannot win the general election and become president again. And if he were to become president, he would hand over this country to the Democrats for the next term. And if that happens, the older members of the Supreme Court that are on there now will be replaced by a Democrat president. We cannot take that chance. We have to have somebody who can serve 2 terms, who can win twice, not only constitutionally, but in terms of his ability to campaign, his ability to convince people. Ron DeSantis can do that. Donald Trump cannot be the nominee because we will lose the Supreme Court if he is. Period. End of discussion. Well, the one of the things that the House is doing right now is they've created a committee to investigate the weaponization of the federal government against the American people. The subcommittee, it's actually a subcommittee, not a committee, my apologies. Chair Jim Jordan is moving forward like gangbusters. And he says the first hearing was just designed to show the gravity and the breadth of the problem. I think our members and our witnesses did a good job of showing that. And what does it mean that the federal government is being weaponized against us? What does that actually mean? Well, let's look at something that just happened this past week. A whistleblower revealed that the FBI internally has categorized various groups of Christians, one of them being what they call radical traditionalist Catholics. They've decided that those people are extremists. They said they were going to spy on these so-called radical traditionalist Catholics. What is a radical traditionalist Catholic? Well, apparently that's somebody who believes in the same values that the Catholic Church has believed in for 2,000 years. Somebody who is opposed to abortion, somebody who is opposed to the LGBTQ extremist political agenda in this country. Those people are considered extremists by the FBI at this point. And the FBI decided that they were going to go after such folks. So when all this news came out, within a day or two, the FBI has pulled the document that declares these people to be a far-right white nationalist movement. Wait a minute. Catholics are white? Catholics are somehow white nationalists? Seriously? That's craziness. There's a lot of Catholics who are not white. I'm Catholic, and my my pastor is from the Philippines. You can't call him white. I know pastors. I know priests from Africa. I know priests from India. I know priests from all over the non-white world. The majority of Catholic priests right now in the world are not white. Probably the majority of Catholics in the world are not white. But somehow the federal government has decided that Catholicism is a far-right white nationalist movement. So they've pulled the document. Now, does that mean that they have decided that this group is not an extremist group? No, they're just going to pull the document. And whatever happens behind closed doors is something that we will not know about. The FBI is being weaponized. There's no question that the FBI is one of the organizations which is being weaponized against the American people. In the last Democrat administration, the Obama administration, it was the IRS. IRS is probably still being weaponized against the American people. The whistleblower against the FBI, a guy named Kyle Seraphin, said that they found a gateway in what they think is fringe Catholicism in order to move into Christians in general and to declare them to be the actual criminals in this country or potential terrorists. The whole document basically is written from the perspective of somebody who thinks there are significant abortion rights that need to be defended and also an LGBTQ agenda that has to be pushed down the American people's throats, and that these are antithetical to Catholicism. You want to bet that the reason for this is because conservative Catholics are in a majority on the Supreme Court? You want to bet that that's the reason they're doing this? I wouldn't bet against it. I would not bet against it. Well, the White House Communications Director, Kate Bedingfield, never heard of her. She's been called a loyal and trusted advisor by President Biden. Today, she announced that she is stepping down as of the end of February. She's going to be succeeded by somebody named Ben LaVault, who's a former advisor to President Barack Obama, and he's currently a strategist for a political consulting organization. I wonder why Biden is choosing somebody who has previously been involved with Obama and is now part of a political consulting group. I think that there's an extremely good chance that this has to do with the fact that he himself has a great deal of difficulty communicating with the American people. And they're looking for better ways. Remember what we spoke about just a little while ago. They're looking for better ways to market and package their message to the American people. And the people behind Obama are pushing their way into the Biden White House so that they have a great deal more influence over the information that goes from the federal government to the American people. We all know that last June, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. The Supreme Court declared that Roe versus Wade is no longer the law of the land, that it was a badly decided decision, that there is no constitutional right to abortion. Well, despite the fact that the Supreme Court made this decision, a federal judge, U.S. District Court Judge Colleen Collar-Cotelli, has said that, well, that might not be entirely true. The Supreme Court only really spoke about the 14th Amendment. But maybe there's a way under the 13th Amendment to declare abortion to be legal. Now, the 13th Amendment, what does the 13th Amendment do? It makes slavery illegal. So her thinking on this, and she asked for both sides in a case that's in front of her to submit briefs on the issue. Her thinking apparently is that by quote unquote forcing someone to remain pregnant, you're putting that person into slavery and quote involuntary servitude. Excuse me? Slavery is the ownership of a human being. Telling someone that after she has done whatever it was that she needed to do in order to get pregnant, that she has a responsibility to not murder her own baby. That's not slavery. Nobody owns her. We're talking about 9 months. Since the passage of the 13th Amendment, we've had several wars where we drafted tens of millions of young men into our military for periods of 1, 2, 3, 4 years at a time. That wasn't considered to be slavery. And that was entirely not undue to the actions of the people who were drafted. Whereas pregnancy is a result of somebody's own actions in all but very, very few cases. So if the draft is allowed, then you cannot say that abortion is slavery. It's much further away from slavery than the draft is. And in neither case, draft or pregnancy, does anybody actually own a human being. This is a ridiculous line of argument. This judge is way off the reservation. There's no way to, in any way, shape, or form, to to declare that abortion or a ban on abortion is the equivalent of slavery. It just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. Well, we spoke a little bit about Governor DeSantis before. Here in Florida, he's moving forward like a steamroller with more and more conservative legislation being brought before the state legislature. One such bill which is being brought up is what's called constitutional carry. Now, I'm assuming that everybody who's listening to this podcast has a really good idea of how the Constitution works. We know what constitutional carry is, but just in case, let's just explain that really quickly. Constitutional carry means that you look at the Constitution. The Second Amendment says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and it takes that literally. The idea of constitutional carry is that you do not need a permit or a license from a governmental entity in order to exercise a constitutional right. You don't need a permit or a license to publish a newspaper. You don't need a permit or a license to record a podcast. You don't need a permit or a license to go to church or to be a preacher in a church. You certainly don't need a permit or a license in order to be safe from unreasonable search and seizure. None of our constitutional rights require a permit or a license to be granted by a governmental entity, with the exception of owning and carrying a firearm. In some states, you need a permit or a license in order to even go and buy a firearm. In other states like Florida, as long as you are permitted under federal law, in other words, you're not a felon and you haven't been involuntarily committed to a mental hospital or in some other way been disqualified, as long as you're not disqualified, you can walk into a gun store, takes them 3 days to do your background check, and you can take your gun home. You can't carry it, but you can take it home. Well, the new bill that's being considered by the legislature, and chances are very, very high that the legislature will actually approve these bills, and Governor DeSantis has said that he will sign this bill, and Governor DeSantis has said that he will sign it, will allow for residents of the state of Florida to carry their concealed firearms with them without a permit or a license. It's pretty good. More significantly, there are now 25 states that already allow this. Florida will be the 26th, which means that the majority of the states do not require a permit or a license for their own residents to carry a firearm. Most of those states still require a permit or a license for out-of-state residents. We'll get to that issue down the road as to whether or not that's appropriate. Government of California cannot pass a law that says that only residents of California can go to church there, or that only residents of California can engage in journalism there. Neither can New York or Florida or any other state. But somehow when it comes to guns, we've created a system where the states have a right to restrict U.S. citizens who happen to live in other states from carrying their firearms in their state. Probably the worst offender in this way is New York. New York has no reciprocity with anybody else. It's an extremely oppressive environment for gun owners. So hopefully down the line, the Supreme Court will address these issues and create equality under the law for all U.S. residents, regardless of the state they live in. Right now, most of our efforts are in states like Florida, where we are creating some real freedom for Americans who want to carry their firearms. It's an amazing advance. Governor DeSantis is also pushing for expanded bans on abortion. Previously, before he became governor, the the abortion age limit was 26 weeks here in Florida. And that was because in I think it was 1989, the Florida Supreme Court, which was entirely dominated by Democrats then, that's no longer the case, decided that the right to privacy as set forth in the Florida state constitution covers abortion. Well, Governor DeSantis pushed a bill through the legislature that lowers that to 15 weeks with the purpose in mind of bringing this case before the Florida State Supreme Court again so that they could have an opportunity to override the previous decision. See, the previous decision was based almost entirely on the reasoning of the federal Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade. Now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, we have the ability to get the state Supreme Court decision overturned as well. But now Governor DeSantis, he doesn't want to wait. He's tired of waiting on this. He knows that there are Florida babies being killed every day, and he wants to make this ban a lot more strict. He wants to ban abortion after 6 weeks. Now, the reality is that as pro-lifers, we cannot accept abortion at any age. We cannot. It doesn't matter what the reason is. You do not kill a human being unless that human being is endangering someone else's life. If someone holds a gun to someone else's head, we have the right to kill him. But we don't have the right to kill a baby no matter what. So it would be best if we had a law that said no abortions whatsoever. Governor DeSantis has shown that he has a legal savvy, that he does this in steps. He takes one step and then he takes another step. He signed a bill banning abortion after 15 weeks. Now he wants to ban abortion after 6 weeks. What happens at 6 weeks? Well, at 6 weeks, most pregnancies are not discovered until after the 6-week mark. So if you've banned abortion at 6 weeks, what you've effectively done is created a situation where there is no profit for abortion clinics. They cannot keep their doors open. They will not have enough opportunity to practice this disgusting, evil business of theirs. And they will end up closing their doors. So abortions will become extremely rare in Florida. And once they've become that rare, the state can pass other rules. The state can go to a heartbeat rule. The state can possibly go down to a 0 abortion rule. They can ban the prescription of the abortion pill, which is now more than 50% of abortions in the U.S. There's a lot of things that can be done once we get this past the state Supreme Court. Right now, Governor DeSantis is fighting a very smart, tactical war against abortion, and he's doing it step by step, and we're seeing that the steps he's taken in the past are not enough for him. He's moving forward, and he's going to do more, and he's going to do more. And as he said about so many other issues, he says, we are far from done. This is a man who has declared war on the left in Florida. Just this morning, I read an article that more than half of LGBT, whatever the alphabet soup is, parents in Florida have decided to leave the state. 17% have already started that process. It's not that Florida is somehow terribly unfriendly to the LGBTQ community. The only thing that's been done, the only thing that Governor DeSantis did is sign a law which says that before the 3rd grade, schools cannot discuss sexuality with children. After the 3rd grade, The only way they can discuss sexuality is in an age-appropriate manner. He hasn't banned talk of sexuality in the schools. He said there is an age up until which a child's innocence should be protected. Parents who want their children to know about this can always talk about it at home. Parents can teach their kids if that's what they want. But at the same time, those parents who don't want this taught to their kids at an early age are now protected. Their children are now protected. But this has somehow incensed this LGBTQ community so much that those who are parents within the community want to leave Florida. Well, go ahead. We're not trying to push you out. But if you don't want to stay, there's the door. But here's what y'all got to remember. Everybody on the left has to understand this. Florida is a solid red state now. We're not a swing state. We're not a purple state. We're not a state that is quote unquote in play. We are solidly red. Every statewide elected position in Florida is Republican. Both our U.S. senators are Republicans. 20 out of 28 members of the U.S. House from Florida are Republicans. More than 2/3. More than 2/3 of both houses of our state legislature are Republicans. We have gone from being a state where there are 750,000 more Democrats than Republicans in 2008 to a state where this year there are 300,000 more Republicans than Democrats. That's a swing of over 1 million voters in a space of less than 15 years. Florida is a red state. Florida is a conservative state. Florida is a Republican state. And we have created a political environment because of who the voters of this state are, not because it's been imposed on us, but by the nature of who the voters in this state are. We have created a political environment where the Democrats do not have a political voice. Not only did Governor DeSantis win re-election by almost 20 points, the highest margin of any Republican in Florida history and the second highest margin of any governor of any party in Florida history. But he also won Miami-Dade County, one of the most urban areas in the state of Florida. He won that by 10 points. You don't see that anywhere else. You don't see Republicans winning major urban centers by any amount, much less by a landslide of 10 points. We're making inroads in Broward County, in Palm Beach County, in Orange County where Orlando is, in Hillsborough County where Tampa is. We're making inroads around Jacksonville. We're making inroads around Tallahassee and Pensacola. We're going to take over the urban areas of Florida as well. We are a solid red conservative state. And we're not going backwards. The Democrats are never going to be able to take this state back again. This state will never go liberal. It will never go left. Hundreds of thousands of Democrats have left Florida already. Their numbers are declining while Republican numbers are increasing. And those who are not enrolled in a party or enrolled in a third party, 2/3 of them vote Republican. So those folks who don't like the way we do things here in Florida, that's your choice. You don't have to agree with us. It's not required. But you're either going to have to accept it or leave. Because fighting it is going to get you nowhere. We are a permanently red, conservative, Republican state. And our governor, chances are, will be the next president of the United States. And the momentum that we have here in Florida, he will carry with him to Washington, D.C., and he will inspire Republicans in both houses of Congress to fight in order to move our values ahead, to advance our values nationally. And we will have an even stronger majority in the federal Supreme Court. And we will protect the lives of our babies. And we will protect the lives of those who are being attacked by criminals by allowing everyday citizens to carry their weapons with them and protect themselves and defend themselves. And we will make sure that we have a strong military and that our veterans are taken care of. And that those who come here illegally are not going to take money away from those efforts. We are going to make sure that America becomes a strong, solid, conservative nation again. And Ron DeSantis is going to be at the very head of the very vanguard of that move. You know, it's amazing what's happening here. We're sitting here in the state of Florida and watching it from this perspective is just, to somebody who grew up in New York, where the Democrats have always had a strong foothold and it's just gotten worse, for me to now be down here, that's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So apparently, Jennifer Granholm, who's our not so great energy secretary, she went to, what state was this? Nevada. Oh, she went to Nevada and she gave a speech about green energy, and she's talking about batteries, and she lists all the various parts of a battery and how it's put together and so forth and so on. And when she's done, the governor goes to the podium and he said, well, let's give a round of applause to the secretary here. She gave us a good science lesson. Do you actually understand the science, or did you just memorize that? It was a joke. It was a joke. And Secretary Granholm didn't like it, so she smacked back and said, oh, well, big words can be intimidating. Of course, she couldn't say it there on the spot. She had to go and say it on Twitter. She had to think about it first and come up with how many times have any of us been insulted and 5-6 hours later, that's what I should have said. It just comes to us. And you don't have that chance. Well, now with Twitter, apparently we do. And especially if you're a politician, you don't have to think of a smart, good answer on the spot. You can go and get your advisors, and you can get your speech writers, and you can ask your best friends, and you can go on a game show and call a lifeline. Apparently that's what Secretary Granholm had to do. She had to wait several hours until she came onto Twitter and come up with something smart to say to smack back at Governor Lombardo. Well, what can you do? Some people can think on their feet, other people can't. Well, this is an interesting issue. There's a case in front of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, which says that probably the First Amendment allows politicians to lie to us. The court says that the ban imposed by the state of North Carolina on dishonesty in political campaigns is, quote, facially unconstitutional. Now, it's not a final judgment. This was just an appeal to try to get those who are fighting this law are trying to get a restraining order against the law, an injunction, and the Court of Appeals refused to. I'm sorry, the people who, they tried to get an injunction, and the court has granted them that injunction, even though the lower court didn't. Sorry about that. Got a little tongue-tied there for a second. Let's see what else is going on. Well, the California Attorney General apparently appointed his own wife to oversee the appropriateness of her husband's budget as Attorney General, how he spends the money. And ethics experts they're calling this problematic at the very least. Former General Counsel for California's Fair Political Practices Commission, Bob Stern, says it should raise eyebrows. It seems to me they have a tin ear about ethics. Well, this is what the left does. This is what liberals do. They don't care about ethics. They don't care about morality. They don't care about values. They don't care about the right thing to do. All they care about is making sure that things go their way. Now, frankly, this guy probably could have found somebody who would just as much be in his pocket as his spouse is. And he wouldn't have had these kinds of flags raised. So this shows just how arrogant, just how hubris-filled liberal politicians are. They don't have any concept of the idea that they shouldn't be doing certain things. That the American people are their employers. We pay their salaries. We're the ones who elect them or elect those who appoint them. They don't care about any of this. All they want is to do what they want to do. All they want is to push their agenda through, to get personal perks for themselves, and to ignore ethics and morality and values and propriety and rules. Nothing applies to them as far as they're concerned. They simply don't care. Well, here we are at the end of another hour. This has been just as much fun as the last two. I thank you all for coming and visiting and listening to what I have to say. I got to tell you, it's cheaper than therapy. Getting people to listen to the sound of my voice without having to pay for it, that's awesome. I got to tell you. In any instance, we'll be back next Friday with another episode of Right Time Reborn. And hopefully we'll get better and better as time goes on. In fact, I know we will. I will. This show will. I'm used to saying we because I had a co-host when I was on the radio previously, and I hope that he'll end up coming back and joining me on this program. But if not, we'll probably get another co-host in some way. In any instance, thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll be back next week. Bye now.